Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Office Bloke Daz.
And Gaynor.
Here we are, just the two of us. Thanksgiving is almost upon us.
It is.
So I thought I'd do a story, the real story behind the first Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Which I don't know.
No, me neither.
Got an idea with the Pilgrims and all that kind of stuff, and Native Americans and all that kind of thing, but I don't know what the real story is.
Yeah.
So I guess we're going to find out. I don't know how true a real story is.
Do you remember our first Thanksgiving?
Our very first Thanksgiving would have been...
Where we went to?
No.
We went to Debbie and John's house.
Right, I do remember
and
it.
the children asked us, were we pilgrims?
Oh, that's right, I remember that, yeah. I do remember that now, yeah. Yeah, it's a deep fried turkey we had, didn't we? Yeah, brilliant. Anyway, let's get into this, the real story behind the first Thanksgiving.
We all know the famous story of Thanksgiving, the picture-perfect meal shared by Native Americans and pilgrims as a symbol of gratitude, cooperation, and peace. The true story behind the feast is much more complex. Among other things, the first Thanksgiving was a temporary celebration in the midst of struggle and cultural misunderstandings. Keep watching to learn more about...
I guess we're going to learn more as we go on, but I thought it was kind of like... my understanding of it, I'm not massive on history, so I'm trying to go off memory of when someone else has told me about it. But again, there may be different stories emanating from different people or different opinions. But I thought it was almost like a peace offering,
right,
from the Native Americans, because they were in conflict, obviously. They're obviously doing all the wrong stuff that we were doing with the Native Americans, and it was like a bit of a peace offering.
Okay.
Is what I was led to believe. It may go into it, I don't know.
Right.
About the Pilgrims, the Native Americans, and the captivating true story of the first Thanksgiving. Who attended the first Thanksgiving? To fully understand the significance of the first Thanksgiving, we must also understand the people who attended it. The Pilgrims, who were struggling to survive in a new world, and the Wampanoag people, who had lived on the land for centuries and were grappling with a changing world as more and more European settlers arrived. We'll begin with the Pilgrims. The early 1600s were a time of exploration, hardship, and survival for the Pilgrims, a group of settlers who had left England to start anew after growing tired of religious persecution in their homeland. After a grueling journey across the Atlantic on the Mayflower, they landed near what we know today as Plymouth, Massachusetts. The journey was brutal. The Mayflower set sail in September 1620 with over 100 passengers crammed into a single deck below the main deck. During the 2-month journey, they faced cramped quarters, poor sanitation, and constant seasickness. To make matters worse, they arrived in America as winter was beginning. Many were already weak from the journey, and the cold made survival even more of a challenge. The Pilgrims' first winter in New England was much harsher than expected. Without enough food and shelter to prepare for the winter, they endured freezing temperatures, illnesses, and malnutrition. By spring, nearly half of the settlers had perished from exposure, unprotection from severe weather, or disease. Every day was a struggle for the newly arrived Pilgrims as their survival hung in the balance.
Do you mean they didn't give them all hotels and free food and transport?
The Pilgrims were not alone. They settled in the territory of the Wampanoag tribe. Despite the Pilgrims' need for help, early interactions between the Pilgrims and the indigenous people were marred by mistrust. The two groups had vastly different cultures, languages, and beliefs. Both sides knew that a misstep might lead to conflict, which neither people could afford. The Wampanoag people had lived in the area for centuries, cultivating the land, fishing, hunting, and gathering. Their leader, Massasoit, was well aware of the encroachment of European settlers and the danger it posed to his people. Along with the threat they posed, Massasoit also recognized the opportunity the newcomers represented. The Wampanoag people had suffered from devastating diseases brought by earlier European explorers, and their population was severely reduced. He believed an alliance with the Pilgrims could help strengthen their defenses against rival tribes. This is where a man named Squanto came in. Squanto was a Patuxet tribesman with a unique perspective on the new European arrivals. Years before, Squanto was captured by English traders and sold into slavery in Spain. He managed to escape to England, where he learned English, before eventually returning to his homeland. Tragically, he found his entire Patuxet tribe wiped out by disease when he returned. Squanto became an interpreter and a mediator, bridging the gap between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag. His knowledge of English and first-hand experience with both cultures made him an invaluable ally to both sides. He taught the Pilgrims essential survival skills, such as planting corn, using fish as fertilizer, catching fish and eel, and safely foraging for edible and medicinal plants. This shared knowledge transformed the Pilgrims' chances for survival, allowing them to finally cultivate their own food. As the relationship between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people strengthened, Massasoit and the Pilgrim leaders agreed on a mutual protection treaty. This pact was intended to safeguard both parties from potential threats and establish peace and cooperation. The alliance was delicate, built on a mixture of trust, caution, and mutual need. The first Thanksgiving feast. By the autumn of 1621, the Pilgrims had managed their first successful harvest with the help of Squanto and the Wampanoag people. This was a monumental achievement for them, drastically increasing their hope for survival after nearly a year of unimaginable hardship and loss. The Pilgrims wanted to celebrate this harvest and express their gratitude for the help they'd received from their Native American allies. So they invited Massasoit, the Wampanoag leader, and his men to join them in a shared meal. This gathering would be what we now know as the First Thanksgiving, and it was meant to strengthen the blooming hope and friendship between the two groups of people. The exact date of the feast is unknown, but most historians place it in late September or early October. Unlike how we typically imagine it, this was not a single meal, but a festival, likely lasting about 3 days. It was a time for feasting, entertainment, and diplomacy. But it wasn't just a celebration. It was an opportunity for both groups to honor their alliance, share their respective traditions, and show mutual respect to each other. They came from wildly different backgrounds, but the first Thanksgiving offered them a chance to connect. Who was there and what did they eat? By the time the first
I kind of like, I'm not sure this is going down the track that I've heard the story on. It's, again, I think you're going to get different stories from different people a lot of the time. Very similar sort of like outline of the story, but, you know, with little bits of detail. What's it? But I thought it was kind of a conflict between the two, between the Pilgrims and the Native Americans. I don't think it was like, it sounds like they were discussing, trying to understand each other. I thought it was more of a conflict.
Yeah. I thought it was.
They have to let me know on that because I'm not 100% sure because history's not my strong point. But I was led to believe it was more of a conflict than it was like trying to understand cultures.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving took place, about 50 Pilgrims were left, a small fraction of the number who had arrived on the Mayflower. On the other hand, Massasoit arrived with around 90 Wampanoag men, a much larger group than the Pilgrims had anticipated. Seeing their native neighbors in such large numbers might have intimidated the Pilgrims, but they welcomed them anyway. Based on those numbers, the gathering would have been approximately 140 people, making it the largest social event the Pilgrims had experienced since their arrival. The food at this feast would have been very different from what Americans now associate with Thanksgiving. While today's Thanksgiving meals typically include turkey, cranberry sauce, and pumpkin pie, the fare in 1621 consisted only of what the Pilgrims and Wampanoag could hunt, gather, and grow with their own hands. The feast most likely consisted of a wide variety of native food. The Wampanoag brought 5 deer. For the Wampanoag, bringing food to a communal feast was customary, and venison was an essential part of their diet. Since they lived so close to the coast, the Pilgrims had easy access to shellfish and other seafood. Mussels, lobster, clams, and even eel may have been part of the feast. Both groups may have provided fowl, like ducks, geese, or wild turkeys. Wild turkeys were native to the region and plentiful, but no historical record confirms that this classic Thanksgiving dish was on the menu. Both peoples might have also harvested vegetables like corn, squash, and beans, as well as nuts and berries that were native to the forests of New England. Chestnuts, walnuts, and beechnuts were likely on the table for that first feast. Although cranberries would have been available, cranberry sauce probably wasn't part of the feast because the Pilgrims didn't have the luxury of sugar. What did the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people do at the feast? While we often envision a large meal when we think of the first Thanksgiving, the feast was not just about eating. Historical accounts suggest that the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag put on various forms of entertainment throughout the event. The Pilgrims used the occasion to show off their military skills through firing drills and musket handling. This was likely a show of strength, demonstrating to the Wampanoag that they could defend themselves if needed. For the Wampanoag, gatherings like this typically involve storytelling, games, and athletic contests. It's possible that the Wampanoag entertained the pilgrims with foot races, wrestling matches, or other forms of physical competition. These activities fostered camaraderie and mutual respect, allowing the two groups to see each other as people rather than just convenient allies. The dark side of the first Thanksgiving. While there was much to be thankful for, and the feast was a time of celebration, it also highlighted the cultural gap between the Pilgrims and the Native Americans. For the Pilgrims, this feast was an expression of gratitude to their God for providing a successful harvest, and to the Wampanoag for their support. For the Wampanoag, sharing food was an important part of their culture, a way of honoring relationships. For Massasoit, participating in the feast was a strategic move and a gesture of goodwill. His people had endured massive suffering from diseases introduced by earlier European explorers, and their population had dwindled. Massasoit's role in the Pilgrims' success was primarily motivated by his desire to secure his people's future in a rapidly changing world. Although the feast is often remembered as a moment of harmony, viewing it within its broader historical context provides valuable insight. The peaceful alliance between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag was short-lived, compared to the centuries of conflict and displacement that followed for native tribes as more Europeans arrived. The first Thanksgiving was a rare moment of unity that would not last,
Right.
and it was soon to be overshadowed by the colonization and conflicts that followed. For those few days, though, the groups found common ground.
That's probably where I'm getting mixed up then. So that maybe there was a little bit of harmony
Yeah.
to start off with, and a little
Yeah.
bit of understanding, a little bit of back and forth in, and then once obviously more flooded in, then it became like a conflict.
Do you think they all started getting it on with each other?
No, I don't.
They shared food, companionship, and maybe a sense of relief knowing that they were stronger together, if only temporarily. While the first Thanksgiving isn't the purely joyful occasion we often think of, it was a symbol of hope and a rare moment of peace in an otherwise conflict-riddled history. The aftermath and legacy of the first Thanksgiving. The peace between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag did not last forever. As more European settlers arrived, tensions grew. The original alliance between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people began to break down under immense pressure from things like land disputes and competition for resources. The settlers' relationship with the indigenous people shifted as the colony expanded. The Pilgrims' descendants and later settlers saw the land as theirs to cultivate and populate, often disrespecting the Wampanoag people and other tribes. This led to a series of conflicts, culminating in King Philip's War, a devastating conflict between the Native American tribes and the New England colonists that lasted from 1675 to 1678. It was one of the bloodiest conflicts in American history, claiming thousands of lives on both sides and leaving a permanent scar on the relationship between the indigenous people and the European settlers. The Wampanoag and their allies faced displacement, death, and a complete upheaval of their way of life. This war casts a shadow on the first Thanksgiving. In light of the suffering that was to come, the feast seems far less significant. Despite the complex and sometimes dark history surrounding Thanksgiving, it is still celebrated as a national holiday in the United States. The holiday we observe now is as much a product of 19th century myth-making as it is of historical fact. In the 1800s, figures like Sarah Josepha Hale promoted Thanksgiving as a unifying event, idealizing it as a time for Americans to come together. President Abraham Lincoln later established it as an official holiday during the Civil War, re-emphasizing the theme of gratitude and national unity. In contrast to the story painted in the years since the first Thanksgiving feast, the real story of Thanksgiving is a brief moment of unity between two vastly different societies, overshadowed by the broader, painful context of colonization. While the gratitude, resilience, and cultural significance of the feast are worth celebrating, it is not simply the joyous occasion that our modern-day holiday makes it seem. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of
Yeah, true, that,
Yeah.
isn't it? You sort of like, you think, it's like the way, I guess a lot of holidays are sort of like over...
Hyped.
Yeah, well, overhyped, over like, what's the... can't know what word I'm looking for. It'll come to me in a minute. But they've got like commercialised is what I was looking for. I think when you've got it like that, and everyone thinks it's a happy, joyful occasion, when you look at the origins of it,
Yeah.
you think, shit, it's not something really to be celebrated
Yeah.
as such. You know, it's one of them where, you know, it's, as the more it goes on, the more sort of like people that when you're talking there, they might have had this food, they might have had that food, they might have had pretty much covered every food that was available.
You just don't know.
You don't know what was there, yeah. But it's the more it goes on as well, the more sort of like as you go through different generations, it sort of like becomes bigger and bigger as like of a feast, of a festive sort of like.
Well, it's a bit like over here with their bonfire night.
Yeah.
You know, if you ask the kids what's bonfire night, they just say it's a bonfire, treacle toffee and fireworks. They don't know the actual...
Yeah, the meaning behind it, yeah. But it's it's quite interesting that, because that's the story I was led to believe was, like I say, was conflict.
Yeah.
And I sort of like, I guess I didn't think what was pre that, you know, and that's where this first Thanksgiving came from. But I think that would have just been like welcome. But it goes to show as well, and some people go to different cultures. You've got to abide by their culture sometimes, and it seems that, you know, that wasn't done by the Pilgrims going into the Native Americans and doing it that way. But yeah, it goes to show that it's not really as festive a feast and a celebration to celebrate, really, is it?
No.
Well, yeah, interesting. That it's, like, knowledge is good.
Yeah,
it's an interesting story. Hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Don't forget, like and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Cheers.